Footsteps came first, careful on crusted snow, beating a clock none of them could see. The field and the forest traded shapes without mercy. They had to hold the junction until relief, 30 minutes if the net was telling the truth, or the road west opened like a wound. A 57mm sat hull down behind a low stone wall, small against the white, its barrel set on the lane where anything heavy would have to slow and show. Shoot too soon and murder your own. Wait too long and die. The engine note was already in their teeth. Somewhere in the village, a flare cracked and lifted, theirs or not didn't matter, and painted fog white. Light once thrown couldn't be called back. The village east of Stavelot was a smudge at their backs, roof sunk under low cloud, church spire bitten off by mist. The field ahead was a rink scarred by black posts and a string of frozen wagons abandoned at a slant. The carts channelized the lane, forcing a tank to thread between wheels and ditch, bringing steel into a narrow where a single shot could decide. Sergeant Ruth Delgado had picked the wall like a sniper picks a window. She draped a tarp to break edges, tucked brush, set escape routes that were more theory than path, and told boots to move only when fog closed like a fist. Private Eli Mercer's radio warmed one shoulder blade through his coat. The net was chaos. Artillery grids, a recon call mixed into a battery's corrections, a voice from the west saying armor was moving to plug holes. Some voices felt almost right, vowels a hair too tight, cadence crisp where Americans wore round. A jeep had just passed an hour ago, friendly scarves, the right dirt, empty waves. That pattern was now lodged inside their judgment, whether they wanted it or not. The field phone line ran back to a farmhouse where a mother's bed had become a switchboard. The wire hummed when you touched it. The hum sounded like the bottom of a lake. Delgado put a gloved hand on the gun's trail and leaned in. Hold fire until we know. Not a request. She feared killing wrong more than dying right. Eli lifted binoculars. Fog threw back only shape, a bow pushing through winter paint, whitewash slashed over a dark hull with a broom. A star floated on the glacis, too clean by half, its edges brushed neat so it would pop like a trick in this kind of light. The turret came slow and forward, cautious in a way that read like American discipline to anyone who wanted it to. A khaki tarp, U.S. issue at a glance, was strapped along the side. Context almost fit. Almost. Sound lied in this weather. Cold ate high notes, fog flattened everything. Engine signatures he'd memorized in a gym in Pennsylvania, the steady rumble of theirs, the busy clatter of theirs, blurred together until his ear was useless. At this distance, sight would have to carry it. Light pulled his eye to the glowing headlamps. He forced himself around them and traced the mounts, the wiring run. The lamps sat wider than his memory allowed, spaced outboard on posts thick with ice. On a Sherman, lamps nestled tighter on the bow. He told himself frost refraction could lie. He told himself inch differences didn't kill anyone. He told himself too much. On the net, someone called a handover that included their crossroads and used the morning's code phrase from a mess table, sticky with coffee. The words were correct. The mouth wasn't. An Eastern accent could explain it, or someone rehearsed it just enough to pass at range. That kind of almost right had been bought in Hauptmann Kruger's world, a calculation that captured tarps and paint, and radios would get one tank past one gun. A ghost of German slipped somewhere behind the right channel, too fast to grab. Delgado's palm touched Mercer's sleeve. Wait. He ran the recognition cards in his head. Road wheels, cupola, idler run. The commander's cupola on a Sherman sits low and smooth, vision slits like a half-closed eye. This cupola, rocking in fog, had a hard notch on the rim and housings like jewelry no one in Detroit made. The turret backline was a shade wrong. If he said it and it was false, they'd guilt-eat forever. If he kept quiet and it was true, the morning would terminate here. His mouth tasted like pennies. He wanted one undeniable detail. A closed fist moved down the line. Hold. The gunner, young, farm-strong, breath steaming the sight, wiped glass with 2 fingers because he needed to touch something. 12 AP rounds sat in crates at their feet, like a number you're not allowed to change. A supply delay had left blanks where more belonged. He wouldn't punch the face. At this range, the one angle that made sense was a right-of-center cut at the lower plate. The fog wavered and showed a weld seam like a scar. The barrel drifted a degree. A prayer near the breech turned to a recitation. Mercer hated it for sounding like everything was fine. Between 2 wagons, the tank threaded careful as a cat. The long gun stayed steady, disciplined, not seeking. Massey on the right wheel muttered traversing anyway because a barrel pointed at you is different than physics says. The antenna bounced. The base looked planted wrong, a stout collar on the hull rather than a whip sprouting on the turret rear the way theirs grew. Small things tell the truth better than paint. Mercer slid left, cheek to stone, angled for a profile. Fog lifted a rib, then laid it back down. The road wheels blurred, too many, too close together, and the front track guard's curve hinted at a line he didn't want to chase. He brought the glasses to his eyes and watched the lamps again. The mounts sat too far out. The lamp glass had a seam he'd been told to look for on cards he'd flipped until sleeplessness became something like study. Still small, still adding, still not enough. Infantry shadows peeled off the hull, low and quick. Bayonets caught light like cat eyes. They moved with the tank's blind spot like textbook. If the gun fired and missed, those men would own the next 20 seconds. Delgado saw them and shifted a degree, small changes that wrapped the big choice tighter. Mercer thumbed the handset. Any friendlies trailing the road? The answer came late and wrong, a yes to something, but not this. A second voice, with a mouth that wasn't theirs, claimed a friendly TD prowled their sector. No call sign he trusted owned it. Reputation for caution fought fatigue. Fatigue likes the first story that warms you. He wanted someone else's certainty. Snow-fattened flakes and carried light. The white star on the glacis glowed back at him. Men salute a star without hands, by lowering barrels, by believing for one breath longer. Delgado kept her hand low, finger flexing on the trail. Guides in her head shuttled a deck. Star okay, whitewash okay, tarps okay, lamps wrong, cupola wrong, antenna wrong. Almosts had stacked past her limit, but she wouldn't shoot on almost. Mercer needed one thing that couldn't lie. The loader knocked knee to trail, swore into wool. The lanyard on the muzzle cover jittered. Burlap stained with old mud and dried blood draped the wall, a farmer's fix made true. Every piece of this field lied. Eli looked for a thing that wouldn't. He breathed and let his eyes drop to the road. Track prints cut the snow. U.S. rubber chevrons leave soft V's. German cleats bite rectangles and leave sharp little islands between. This road was churned to brine. He needed one untouched edge. He slid the glasses down to naked eye again. Lamps wrong, cupola wrong, antenna wrong. A hulled MG sat inboard of where a Sherman would put one. Inches and bolts were faithful. He opened his mouth, and a gust hit him with ice-like sand that made him swallow the word. The barrel dipped fractionally as the tank found a rut. The infantry hugged the wagons. A flare popped somewhere, not theirs, white, and smeared the fog into a sheet that kissed the tank's face and made the lie sing. Delgado wiped a useless hand across the front sight. She would wait for the thing that couldn't pretend. She told the gun stand by without raising her voice. Kruger, or whoever wore his thinking, had counted on this distance, this light, this professionalism. He'd counted on them being careful. He wasn't wrong. A horse in a barn cried once, hooves stamping sound into cold air. Men around the gun didn't flinch. Their fear had thickened into focus. Mercer pictured the cleat signature he wanted, then saw at last the soot ring blooming around a Hull MG where no Sherman carried one. Words lined up. Say it, and the morning pivots. Swallow it, and it ends. The tank kept coming, whitewashed dragging fog like a torn veil. The 57 crouched, muzzle tucked in, patient. Eli pressed wool to eye cups, lifted, and caught the face easing past 2 Belgian carts fused by ice. Lamps farther apart than the aluminum template in his card would allow. The disguise peeled an inch. The radio packed his ear with overlaps, recons, fire missions, someone insisting friendlies were returning, someone else asking for WP. He had grown up on crisp silhouettes in dry light. Fog had bent lines that classroom walls had never seen. Details that didn't perform were the saints he had left. Headlamps too wide. He set that in his mind and refused the flare's theater. Delgado's hand held her men low. She counted range falling. Friendly armor had used this same bend before dawn. The thought of tearing a U.S. star open made her stomach clench. Shoot wrong and shatter more than stone. Spare wrong and get erased. Those were the only doors. Eli slid the little laminated card onto his knee. Late Sherman M4A3, lamps tight, dome cupola, antenna rear turret. The real shape cast onto that card by fog drew a notch he could feel. The hull scraped a wagon shaft. Snow fanned from the fender. The idle rattled with a metal high note a Sherman didn't own. He didn't trust ears, but detail was courting him now. The field phone tugged his ankle. Someone breathed on the line and made a question. The hum thickened under his glove. The lane forced closeness into inevitability. The tank squared to squeeze. Turret and hull drifted and offered a thin slice of side. Delgado's knuckles went white. Count road wheels if you can, they had taught him. He counted enough to know it wasn't 3 bogeys and a dream. The wind lifted fog like a curtain being small and late, and Mercer flattened the card against Delgado's sleeve with a pencil jabbed at the notch he had drawn. Wrong lamps, wrong cupola, wrong antenna. Tracks steel. German. He stacked the words fast before luck changed shape. Another flare popped near the village and went wrong, red, then stopped where the wind wanted and hung over their wall. It haloed their breath into steam, lit mortar lines, washed the tank's face in bloodlight, and sold their position to anything with a lens. The turret reacted like a dog to a whistle and swung smooth toward the brightest texture. A commander bobbed, helmet bell wrong, no brim, a hand jabbed, the coke snout twitched to find where human was. Invisibility was gone. Seconds had cramped into one. Delgado hissed, blade thin. Fire. The 57 cracked. Recoil dug the carriage back, muzzle wash flattening frost on weeds. Eli felt the hit in his soles before he saw the lurch. Whitewash feathered off, a star blinked at a sly angle. The tank clawed at road, trying to push past wagons that blocked the turn. Slush fanned. Track teeth printed wrong, steel cleats, not rubber chevrons. Proof took shape in ice while they still breathed. Left traverse, Delgado barked, and trails scuffed, wheels squealed against frozen ruts. Smoke streamed from their barrel. Eli shoved another AP home. He had time to tally what was left, 8, before the breech slammed. The barrel hunted the pale flank. They were trading numbers for survival. The engine coughed and roared. The turret overshot. Coke scissored the lane, knocking snow off stone in chalky curtains. Chips stung Eli's cheek. The cupola notch that betrayed the lie popped and sank in fog like a guilty eye. He pulled again. The second round bit low at the bogey line. Track spat wood as a wagon wheel exploded, spokes turning into darts. Shapes unfroze along the hedgerow. German infantry slid out from the tank's shoulder, bowed and quick. Bayonets winked gray. They were coming. Delgado stabbed 2 fingers to the right, flankers, and stayed on the traverse. Rifles at the farmhouse opened ragged and high, stitching fog. The men in the ditch kept their pace and angle. The bowl of the junction started to slosh. The net thrashed, unit names, bearings, a recon voice saying friendlies moving west, armor trailing, then another voice, flat and pruned, saying the road was compromised, enemy wearing stars. Both collided into static. Eli tried to answer and pulled noise. In the farmhouse, the switchboard clicked. Someone coughed or laughed. The line died. Their last quiet path was gone. The tank's bow dug into a drift, trying to take the angle, the star smearing. The antenna still wrong on the hull. Eli's instinct wanted to narrate for the record. Wrong place, wrong plate, but he pressed his glove flat on the breech instead. The next round had to count. They rocked the gun, the spade grinding down stone into powder. Eli's boot slid, skidding a wet stripe on steel. He dropped the third AP in and pulled. Sparks showered off the turret ring. The tank stuttered like a boxer passing 30 in the ring. Kruger's machines swung for their muzzle flash, not the wall, and the coax raked low. Tracers combed the stones and lit frost in a brief sparkle like sugar under a match. Someone behind Eli grunted and went quiet. The loader's mate, no time to turn. The red flare snagged in the hedgerow and refused to die, throwing orange over them that made their barrel glow like a stovepipe. The turret searched, found the height of stone, and the fog lit with muzzle blast. A hasty shell stamped light and hate. They had seconds measured in one breath. Delgado ducked so fast her helmet kissed the breech. "Reposition," she said, "but trails don't move under fire fast." Decoy. Eli grabbed a folded tarp, thumb on the burn seam where blood had soaked and dried, and flung it over a fence post, perched a helmet on top. He boot-swept steaming brass into snow so it wouldn't write them in letters. The enemy squad hit the lower field and peeled left in a ripple, the right way to unwrap a wall. The lead man's ear had gone white in cold. His breath was a plume. The tank hiccuped over a mangled axle and swung a little too far, exposing a square of soft. Delgado's hand came down. Now. The round went in just forward of the turret seam. Gas screamed out and smoke ballooned. The shape kept trying to be itself. Then something inside refused orders. No time to watch anything burn. A new engine note whispered from the tree line, lower, shy at first, then bold. A second snout edged out, wearing the same stage paint, the same star, nose pointed like a finger. Snow glare bounced off the headlamp glass. Habit wanted to call it a friend. Then the inch truths came back, lamps too wide, cupola notch, antenna collar, and Eli's hands went without permission. "Wrong," he said to no one. The radio coughed a challenge, voice off in a string that could be theirs if you squinted. The reply came with the right rhythm and wrong grace. Delgado lifted her head like prey, hearing the cat. "Hold." She started, then bit it. The first tank had eaten 4 AP. The crate said 5 if the chamber stayed honest. The farmhouse door banged. 2 riflemen stumbled in from fog and jammed the phone plug into the dead board. "Friendlies westbound," someone shouted. Armor told to push. That was the shape coming at them, and pattern loves repetition. It's warmer than caution. Delgado's caution was a hard thing made of facts you can touch. Here the facts were wet and inches thick. She looked to Eli. He had more power than hours should have given him. He looked down and asked the ground. The new print overlapped the old. He pushed a mittened hand into the overlap and felt steel teeth where rubber should have left a soft mark. He came back with ice shaved into little squares by spikes. Proof in a language fog couldn't translate. The infantry felt the turn in them and surged, not at the gun but around it. 2 sprinted for the farmhouse back door. 1 hopped trees in the orchard. 1 slid to the stone pile at the lane corner. The gun can kill one thing at a time. Point it left, and the right unravels. Delay here becomes a letter later. "Hit the new one," Delgado said. "Clean words." They heaved the trail. Metal rasped rock. The muzzle found the new nose. Eli didn't list the tells. He loaded AP-8 with hands that shook and didn't, tasted smoke he hadn't made yet. The wind pulled fog sideways. For a heartbeat, geometry returned. Their props were getting better. Jerry cans on fenders, a tarp tied wrong, like an actor learning lines. Up close, the run of road wheels, too many, carried a rhythm Detroit didn't own. Reason and risk, then act. He yanked. The round struck early and skated into nothing. The enemy's reply punched the wall. Stone lifted and folded a rifleman who'd leaned too far. The shield rang like a struck bell. Eli's jaw clicked. Misses cost more than rounds. The crate said 4. Another engine woke behind the second, a third low growl in trees. It wasn't one deception, but a flood meant to drown doubt with repetition. If the junction fell, the road to Stavelot opened, bridges followed, and the West would get a knife. Delgado found Eli's sleeve with her glove. After the next, we moved 10 yards. Second wagon ruts, new mask, phones are gone, cover, rope with knots, climb or drown. The infantry didn't pause to admire planning. A grenade arced and gutted a drift. Another, closer, found stone and screamed dirt down their collars. Eli popped the last tarp decoy further right, spiked a helmet on it. Bad jokes save lives if you tell them in the right voice. The loader tore 2 AP free. Eli fed 1, cradled the last in his arm. The barrel hunted seam. The German driver dragged slush up to blur it, learning by the round. Details teach fast. Aim where snow sticks behind spare track lengths bolted on wrong. Winter shows lies. Eli fired. The round kissed in quiet and did the ugly work you only see in smoke. The tank paused like an animal that had registered pain in a deep place. Its turret stopped mid-turn. The commander cracked the hatch for air. Eli saw scarf gray with a red thread and an eye flick to the first burning tank as if measuring his ghost. Delgado didn't let the pause sell her anything. A green flare rose from somewhere to the east, drifted, settled over the orchard like witchlight, and framed the German squad peeling toward the farmhouse. The rifleman finally got a clean rake and buzzed the hedge. 2 men wrote lines in white, the others scattered. Pressure bled a finger width. 10 yards might exist. The wounded second tank backed an inch, then another. Space opened like a held breath. Delgado hissed, "Go." Trails kicked and lifted. The wall let them go like a grudging gate. Spade teeth squealed on frozen ruts, bit new ground. They tumbled into the second position they'd measured with boots when the fog still looked like help. It bought them angle and a hayrick's shadow, and got them off the spot the flare had framed. It wasn't safety. It was better. Spikes hammered. A tarp decoy tilted into the old arc. Steam rose from the barrel, hot pennies and river water. Eli stopped hearing his own heart and heard engines and twig drip. He glanced at their new rut, print writing itself. Tracks would tell a story later for some stranger's finger. He wanted that finger to read that they had held. Delgado pinched his sleeve. Ready? He was no longer hands only. He nodded to the tree line. The third engine gave up pretending to sneak. The tank nosed into view, whitewash more practiced. Its star was cleaner, the white truer. The antenna on the turret sported too many bolts, German standard under a U.S. hat. Headlamps almost right at first glance, betrayed by the plate thickness beneath. The costume had changed. The bones had not. They waited for the third tank's barrel to choose. It took the decoy, bought the lie they had built, and committed. The shell blew the tarp and fence post into wet confetti. The false muzzle flash gave them a half-breath. They didn't shout. They ran the drill. Eli lifted the last AP the way you lift a promise you can't pay later. Replacement trucks were somewhere in some ditch with cleats stamped around them like signatures on a bad treaty. Kruger, if it was him, had let distance delete particulars all morning. Up close, oil smell brings truth back. Eli watched for a chord, lamps, cupola, antenna, all singing the same wrong note. He saw it and gave a small nod. He aimed low at the lower plate, because physics learns slower than hope. The round punched a hole air wanted. The turret rocked and settled to a slow idle. Smoke rolled fat and wet. The infantry in the orchard wavered, human again. Delgado said. Eli felt the different weight. He sent one into the hedgerow and turned men into punctuation. A drum flipped. Oil painted the lane with rainbow that would freeze pretty in a way he'd hate remembering. German fire sagged, then thinned. Their smoke grenades still veiled the wall, wind for once kind. A shape pitched forward, then back, then was gone into fog and a hollow well sound. In the lull, Eli's eye dropped to ground again, as if gravity wanted proof. The rut left by the third tank was a photograph. Steel cleats cut into dirt, edges sharp, islands of unpressed snow between like stamps. American chevrons would have left soft V's. He formed an answer for when someone would ask later how he knew. Headlamps, cupola, antenna, tracks. Tracks alone would have done it if you got low. The idle from the third tank settled into sulk. Inside, a hand hovered over a lever. Pride argued with prudence. Delgado didn't let either win. She sent the last tee to the culvert where a knot of dark still moved. The blast lifted them up and ironed them flat. The road breathed. The junction wasn't safe. It was empty for a minute. Minutes have kept men alive. The third tank reversed tentatively and found there was nowhere to go. Wagons, wrecks, hedgerow. It slewed too far and showed a sliver of flank, a small surrender. Delgado set a palm to the cooling barrel like you set a hand on a dog to feel it settle. She glanced at Eli and then at the rut. He nodded. She nodded back, a conversation of iron. By the time fog gave them the silhouette of a hatch cracking and a man climbing, a rifle on the farmhouse roof tapped an answer and folded the figure like paper. The hatch clanged against nobody. Kruger's spear, if this was it, died not by drama, but by detail. Paint can lie. Steel can't forget the shape it was cut. Snow began to stick soft, muffling. The field phone sat dead beside Eli's knee. The radio spit orders and promises. Far west, a real Sherman asked for smoke on a bend. In the lane, carts that had forced closeness now sat as witnesses. A child's doll lay face down. Its print filled as he watched. Eli picked a spent casing still warm, dropped it into snow, and listened to it hiss out. They didn't cheer. Men looked to treeline as if an answer would raise its head. Nothing did, and that felt wrong. Delgado allowed one breath and then sent them to work, sandbag the crack in the wall, drag more cover, find he or don't. Mercer cut the radio down to what their lane could use, thumb light on the transmit switch to feel it pulse. He wrote on the back of his recognition card in pencil that would smear "Cleats in rut, German." He folded it and tucked it into his breast. Surviving is not the same as remembering. The fog shifted like someone opening a window. For a moment they saw farther than they deserved. Tracks led away into the trees, wrong running in a line, every cut a page. Snow sifted into the prints, rounding knife edges, softening truth. The road began to look like itself again, except for the broken wall, the burnt carts, the mouth of a tank that thought a star could change what it was. Eli crouched and ran a glove across the nearest indent. Steel had written itself into the morning. For one more breath, winter held the proof. From deeper wood, something old and low turned gears and listened to itself. Delgado looked to the tree line. She didn't wait for it to decide for her. Dig, shift angle, mark with smoke if we get it, eyes on the lane. The junction breathed once with them, then set its teeth for whatever came next. Snow whispered into a cleat print and turned edge to memory. The men behind the wall tightened scarves and picked up tools that could be weapons if asked. The road lay quiet in a way that almost wasn't. The next decision walked toward them, engine note small and steady, hidden by white, inches and inches and inches away.